Hi, everybody. It's Mimi from Be Hard, Empower Yourself. And today we have with us Reneé Rodriguez. Did I pronounce your name right?
Yes, you did.
Good. I try to be an expert at that. And Reneé is the founder of the Custody Blueprint program, which we're going to talk about. And many, many, many mothers um, and maybe fathers too, have been in this situation because of that intersection that comes up when children are involved. And sometimes we think we're doing things for the children, but we're doing them for ourselves, and the children get hurt. But Reneé, say hello first and tell us a little bit about you.
Yes, hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Reneé Rodriguez. I am a custody strategist. I spent about 15 years in nonprofit and corporate strategy, and then another 10 moving the strategy into the family court space. But I'm also a certified DV advocate and certified in strangulation prevention.
Mm,
I'm a divorce mediator and a parent coordinator in New Jersey as well.
yeah. And you're also a survivor of the kind of things that you now help people with.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, my well, the father of my children, I don't even want to use the word husband, but the father of my children, it's a long time ago. But when I divorced, when I finally had up and divorced him, like he used the children as pawns, and some of the things he did was dangerous to them. Like he put sugar in my gas tank in my car. Now, if someone didn't tip me off, who knows? I have the kids in that car, things like that. He was violent. Um, but you know what? It was the early 70s and they did not protect women at all.
Yeah.
At all. There was no hotline, nothing. And I went through a lot of stuff where I think now, boy, I wish I had some of the things that are available now. But I survived. I survived. And my kids are great. They went to college. They have careers. They have children of their own. So I do a good job. So what was the breaking point that made you realize that parents needed a blueprint, that their own custody battle um, needed help?
Yeah. I I would have to say it was in the middle of my own custody battle, of course.
Hmm.
Um, I had a great lawyer. I still felt like there was a gap. I still felt like there was more that he could have understood. There was more that I could do to help us in family court. And I had happened upon, and this was a long time ago when there really was no such thing, like the divorce coach. I don't mean like the goat, which she sort of still remains, but rather she was the only one out there really doing it
Oh, yeah.
within. So I worked with her. She was the one who identified that it was rare that she had seen someone who she said was the second worst case of psychological abuse she had ever seen in her life. Um, but we did quite well. And then it reached a point where we were going to be in a custody evaluation. Now, this is a piece of a custody battle where, if the custody battle goes on long enough, they bring in somebody to spend an extensive amount of time investigating you and your co-parent and talking to the kids to determine what should the custody arrangement be? What should that evaluator recommend to the court? And when I went to my divorce coach and said, how do I prep for this? She said, this is a big, huge thing. I know a couple of people who are starting to help people with this. I think they're full, but I'll ask. She came back to me and said one of them is not doing it anymore. She can't take all of the stories of abuse.
Hmm.
And the other one is full for months.
And you
She
had the
but
children, you had them in your custody while this was going on. Yes?
did, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And she said, Reneé, the thing of it is you have a background in strategy. What if you just try to put something together and me and you will do our best?
Mm-hmm.
So I went ahead and put something together, keeping in mind my background. And when I showed it to her, she said, I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen abuse laid out so clearly and so compellingly. And she said, you should be doing this.
Wow.
To which I was kind of like, slow your roll. I'm in the middle of a custody battle.
Mm-hmm.
But a year and a half after my custody battle was done, someone else who was working with Tina had said, she's sharing your templates and your tools with everyone, and they're so good, and you should expand and you should take real ownership of these things and do this. So I retired from doing all the strategy and the nonprofits and the corporations, and I decided to simply strike out and create something to fill that gap that was there, and in truth, even now as we get more people into the field, is still there. So for me to be able to create that due to the background I had was something that felt like a calling, but it also became something that became very natural for me. I very much enjoyed the places I worked,
Mm-hmm.
but do something that had such real, direct, immediate impact.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You know, it almost seemed like something I couldn't walk away from. The real challenge, of course,
Yeah.
as usual, finding the balance between indeed, many people walk away from this because
Mm-hmm.
hearing these stories all the time, if you don't have the right kind of personality to be able
Exactly.
to have complete empathy for it, but to compartmentalize it,
Yeah.
but you need that for your own health, but you also need it in order to be able to do it well. So, now at this point, we're a company, there's
Mm-hmm.
quite a number of people, about 20 of us, and we're doing the work that's based on the custody blueprint, which I did indeed expand to
Mm-hmm.
cover city A to Z. But the truth is that my heart and my personal passion when I'm working one-on-one with people, most of the people who are sent directly to me
Mm-hmm.
are for preparing for that all important custody evaluation, because 85 to 90% of judges will go along with whatever that custody evaluator recommends. So
Yeah.
it's the evaluator that you need to get right more than anything.
Yeah. We didn't have those things back in the day, but my sore spot with any situation where people are breaking up and they have children is my ex did this. They use the children as pawns.
Yeah.
And that is, you know, so terrible to me. And for instance, like he would tell them, oh, he had weekends, they get weekends. And there were weekends he didn't come. And then, or he'd say, I'm coming next weekend and we're going to Disney World. Now, I knew that wasn't going to happen. So the one Sunday they sat in the window watching for him for an hour. And
Mm.
of course, he didn't come. And I said, something must have happened. And then you have to try not to say anything bad about the other person. Let's go to the park. One other short thing he did, which, it's just amazing to me that people are like this, so evil. I had to be on welfare because he didn't pay child support.
Yeah.
But the lucky part of that is, at the time anyway, if you were a mother with children and not receiving the child support, therefore had no income because you couldn't work even, um, they had money, food stamps, and they gave me money to go to college. They paid for my college and they
Yeah.
bought me a car. It was like, oh my God. So I got them in two good nursery schools because the age difference, the one school would not take unless you were potty trained, which today there's some schools like that too. Anyway, I would take them to their daycares. I would go to college. I would study at the university. And between classes, I would do my homework because I wasn't going to have time at home, that kind of thing. And he saw that I was succeeding and becoming something. And he called the welfare office and said, um, she's working,
Mm.
which was a lie. He told her I was working. So they stopped the welfare and everything, right?
Mm.
And then one other time, I had the children and he took them for the weekend, but he had literally moved in with a woman that wanted children. And so the weekend he took them, he kept them. He kept them, thinking this woman could be their mother figure. I mean, really, it took me. In fact, she, not him, had them for months, and I did get a job and I worked. But guess what, Renee? I was seeing them on weekends. And after a while, I said, you know what? This isn't bad because I spent more time with them on the weekends
Yeah.
than when it was reversed, right? So I was going to let it go on. But when he saw that I overcame it and accommodated it, he came to my parents' house on Easter Sunday, left the kids at the door, drove away. They rang the doorbell, and I went down there and they said, Mommy, Daddy said, if you don't want us, we have to go to an orphanage. Now, that's just evil, 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 you know? So that's just that part of my story. And that was in the 70s. And there's a lot more outlets now that you can go to and people, but still, what you do is very important because he didn't want custody. He just wanted to torture me. And anyway, that's my part of my little story, just to throw that in there. So the listeners know that I've been through it. I understand what you're talking about. And with your program, um, you help the parents respond to the post-separation abuse that continues through the legal system. Explain what that means.
Well, it's similar to what you were just talking about. It's about punishment, right?
Mhm.
It's essentially, I must punish you for seeing through me. I must punish you for leaving me. I must punish you for identifying that I'm not much of anything.
Yeah.
I must punish you for taking my property, the children, my
Mhm.
property, yourself, my property,
Oh,
anything
yeah. Oh,
else,
my gosh, yes.
anything. It's about punishing the other person for
It
not
absolutely is.
staying.
But it falls over to the kids too, because they witness things they shouldn't witness. They hear things and they see their mother upset. I'll say mother because I can only talk from that aspect. But what you said about ownership, yes, there are some narcissistic or psychologically ill men. I have to talk about the men because I only have that experience. You can talk about the other side, but they do look at you as property.
Yeah.
Like my ex-husband considered me his property. And even after I divorced him, he stalked me for 2 years. Like he would not let go. He wanted me back. And he also made it so impossible for me to survive. And I think other women have done this, that a couple times I tried to go back and make it work.
Mm.
And what couldn't work. And then of course when I'd say it's not working, we go back to the punishment phase, you know.
Yeah.
So the toll it took on me, I don't even notice what happened at the time because I was so concerned about my children, you know. But there's a book, The Body T Takes the Score. Have you heard that? Yeah,
Body Keeps the Score by
Body
Bessel
Takes the
van der Kolk.
Score.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh my God. So
Yeah.
that is it. That stays in you. That doesn't go away. Even when I finally got rid of him and it's still all in there and other things came up and I had to rebuild myself psychologically and spiritually. Yeah. So you find too, I'm sure the same thing, that the woman
Absolutely.
gets.
I mean, and it varies as to how long it might take for any of these women. I know you said, we talk about men. I do want to make it clear that,
Mhm.
85% of domestic violence victims are women, and out of the
Yes.
10 to 15% really who are
Yes.
males, 49% of those males are being abused by another male, and 48% are being abused by women. So, yes, absolutely, women can be the problem.
Mostly women. Yeah.
But it's this much of the,
Yeah.
most of
Yeah.
the time it's going to be the father, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But recovering from it is something that it really takes time. And I'm so glad that you're so familiar with Van der Kolk's work with The Body Keeps the Score, because he really goes through the top four ways to recover from it,
Yes.
right? These are the
Mhm.
things that there are lots of things you can do that will help. But if you're looking to really get rid of the trauma, here's
Mhm.
basically what you should be doing. And so, of course, I'm going to recommend it's a very dense read. And so,
Mm. Yeah.
many times a lot of my clients have said that when they do are brave enough to start listening to it, which I think everyone should, listening to it on audio is a much easier way to go for many people.
Mhm.
But when it comes to, I would say, custody, and this is where it gets important, that trauma showing up in court can seriously hurt the case, because that punishment, that post separation abuse that you were asking about, can really be weaponized in court,
Mhm.
most especially and most effectively by the abuser creating a narrative. Look at this mom, look at this woman. The children are anxious because she's anxious. She's mentally unstable. She had PPD. She had, which she may or may not even have had. She's this way, she's that way. And when that trauma shows up in the courtroom on that protective parent, on that protective mom, it fulfills that false narrative coming from
Yes.
the abuser.
Yes, it does.
So it's really crucial that when we're doing the work, we call it a court persona, and I'll tell you why. Because that may sound cold, but it's a way for people for that we find very effective for our protective parents to sit up and take notice about the fact that you have different personas that are necessary and that are largely or completely authentic. You're a different person when you are parenting your kids. You're a different person at a parent teacher conference. You're a different person when you're interviewing for a job. You're a different person at at a meeting with your boss, in church, having margaritas with the girls,
Of
right? Whatever it may
course.
be.
Hmm.
You're a different person in each of these
Yeah.
circumstances, but that doesn't make any of them fake.
No.
Rather, we know that, we are made up of all these different things inside of us that come out. And there does need to be a court persona as well that's equally as authentic,
Yeah.
that there is that same level of awareness that one might have, for example, going into a job interview. What is the decorum there? How is it that you're showing up?
Yeah.
What is okay to say, and what do you unfortunately need to let go because the court is not trained in it, or they don't recognize it, or they don't care, or it doesn't fit the law for them?
Oh, I know.
All the things you have to let go of, even though they're an important
Hmm.
part of the story, in order to focus on the important parts of the story to make a difference
Yeah.
in custody case so that you can get the custody arrangement that's safest for your children.
Yeah. And I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Joe Biden's hometown. I used to say that
I used to go there too.
because we actually knew his younger brother because
Yeah.
he's older than us. But anyway, Scranton was a very political and even connected mafia people were in the town, connected to the larger web. They were the smaller web of a big family that might be, I'm talking mafia families. And my ex was involved with people in both of those areas. And it wasn't what you knew, it was who you knew. Okay. So it
Yeah.
didn't matter if you beat your wife, if you didn't pay child support. When you went to court, and they looked over and they saw who your lawyer was, who was also a big deal, they would err on the side of my case and go with them. And I had that happen to me quite a few times. And the last time they did it to me, I mean, he hit me in front of my children, you know. And then another night, this is all the same case. I did go out with girlfriends, like you said, and my girls were with my parents. I think that's responsibility for a mother. They're
Hmm.
with safe people.
Hmm.
I could stay out as long as I wanted to. I
Hmm.
was over 21 and I left a place, and my date and I had a great time with the two bartenders. So we closed up. So it was like 2 in the morning. And we left and we're walking towards our cars. And he stopped. I don't know how he found out, but he knew a lot of people. Somebody in the bar that night told him I was there. So he stopped his car in the middle of the street with the engine running, jumped out. Now, mind you, this guy was a bouncer. So he was 6'4" and he weighed about 280 pounds. He was a big man. He jumped out, went right by the men, punched me in the face. He punched me right in the nose. He knocked me out. I was unconscious. Unconscious. I had three witnesses, right? And then he like ran back to his car and drove off before the guys could, it was so fast they couldn't stop it. So I go to court with all of this. They did make up what they call a bill. You have to have it passed first by the grand jury.
Mhm.
So I had the three men testify. And when I went in to testify, the guy that I think was supposed to be on my side that would want the bill passed, he kept emphasizing that I was out drinking till 2 in the morning. And like, I said, wait a minute. The children were with their grandparents. Long story short, the bill didn't pass.
Mm.
And like I said, it's a who you know town. I left there. I was so ripping mad. I walked down to the DA's office. I walked in and I said to the lawyer that did this trial, I don't know how much they paid you or who paid you, but I need you to know that I am going to buy a gun right now. I'm leaving here and I'm going to buy a gun. And he said, I don't think you should tell me that. And I said, yeah, I think I should tell you that because it's that bad. It's that bad that when he does stuff like this and the police come, he's already gone, and they tell me, we can't do anything because he's not here now. And one day a policeman, this is hard to believe, but it's true. It's in my book, Raised by Wolves, Trapped by Demons. He hit me one night when I was coming home from being out with the girls, and my kids were with my parents. It was a weekend, and I called the police, and the policeman said before he left, look, we can never do anything unless they're actually on the scene and we could see, what's going on. Get a gun and shoot them next time. You have every right. It's just like in Florida, they have what's it called? I can't think, Renee.
And
Stand
and
your ground, stand
what?
your ground law. So this is back in the 70s. They didn't do that then. And this is the funny part. He said, and if he's outside the apartment when you shoot him, drag him inside. Well, I thought, this is amazing. But I didn't shoot him. I did have a gun. I did buy a gun. I did have it. Yeah. But it didn't come to that. But there was nothing else for me. And that,
Yeah,
like I said, that was between 1974 to 1980 that I had him in my life. And I couldn't, I even moved away. He went to the town I moved to. It was like, what am I gonna do? You know. So I totally understand the predicament when you're going, if custody battle, this wasn't even a custody battle. This was an ownership of his ex-wife battle.
yeah.
But I totally understand. But the children are affected by this, and the custody battles, I can only imagine. You can't keep everything from them.
Well, I think I think it is possible to keep everything from them, but I think that the abusive parent does tend to drag them into the middle of it.
It's
Uh,
kind of hard not to. Being in their shoes,
yeah,
I never wanted to say bad things about their father. Like I never told them when they were young, oh, he hit me last night. I wouldn't say that. But
right.
I remember one Christmas, my daughter wanted a bike, and there was no way I could buy a bike. And I slipped and I said, well, if your father paid his child support, I could get you a bike. Oh my God, I was so sorry after I said that. You know, that was one of the things you're now told not to do, blame the other parent for that. But I felt badly for her that I said that because it damaged her, you know. But when you said they don't notice, kids notice the tension, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they
Absolutely. They
do.
absolutely do. Yeah. Whether or not that's due to a custody battle is a different thing, but they absolutely do. I have a lot of I hear this a lot from clients where in some manner or another they share that their children have shared with their therapist or their teacher, whatever, that my parents don't like each other very much. And it's
Hmm.
an interesting thing the way they have that interpretation, because really what we find is that the abusive parent is bad mouthing the heck out of the protective parent, and the protective parent is just very tense
Yeah.
around their abuser. And so a child sort of defines that as the two parents not liking each other. Clearly, the one doesn't like the other. They read the tension as not liking,
Hmm.
and which, of course, there's truth to that. Obviously, an abuse victim is not going to like their
No.
abuser,
Right.
but the abuser is usually quite vocal about their disdain for others,
Oh,
even
yes.
including the child's mother,
Yeah.
whereas a child's mother is just living in a very triggered state whenever they have to see their co-parent, whenever they're hearing about their co-parent. And I know parents who handle the abusive parent being talked about beautifully. Dad took me to Disneyland and bought me all kinds of stuff. Meanwhile, she hasn't gotten paid child support. She hasn't been reimbursed for medical expenses.
Exactly.
She hasn't seen anything, but she's not going to badmouth the dad. But of course, she's going to feel triggered by the fact that she's taken on a second job. She's taken on a side hustle in order to make up for doing it all alone
Yes.
financially, and
Yeah.
really raising the children alone anyway, because an abusive co-parent is just somebody who um, is giving the healthier parent a break from parenting for a minute when they do get them. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah. I know.
Of course, the children are going to think the parents don't like each other.
Oh, yeah. There's no way. I mean, there's no way to fake it. And even if I could fake it, he was always hostile. So that came through. And he would say things about me that weren't true. And well, I'm going to put them in an orphanage. I mean, to say that, forget about hurting me.
That's child
Hurting,
abuse,
that's child abuse.
psychological abuse.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when my kids were teenagers, well, first of all, through all of the trauma I had in the first part of my life, I became a functional alcoholic because the alcohol was a coping mechanism for me. But I was very functional. Like I was involved in all the school activities. I sent my kids to dance lessons. I had parties for their friends, and nobody ever thought of me as a drunk. Okay. But I was an alcoholic by standards of the health industry. And when I got sober years later, I was still depressed and I was still unhappy until I went to an inpatient institution to work on, go deeper.
Yeah.
And I was there for 3 weeks and I was a lot better. And then I came back and 5 years went by and I went into a deep depression. Now, they had told me at rehab that I was clinically depressed and had panic disorder. Oh, I wonder why.
Very
But
common.
so those things didn't go away. And with clinical depression, like people don't have to be bad to you and your life doesn't have to be bad. It's just all of a sudden it comes out of nowhere. And I went to the Karen Foundation for 5 days, and guess what they worked on? The
Mm.
family you grew up in. Because unfortunately, we marry our fathers. And my father was alcoholic, and my mother was a narcissist. Okay. And I bring that into the picture because until I did all that work on myself, and the mothers that you work with, I'm sure they know they have to do a lot of work on
Mhm.
themselves because the toll, just the battle going through this is so harmful to the psyche, like the woman. It really is. I mean, I felt very powerless. Powerless.
Yeah,
That's the word. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a helplessness and sometimes even a hopelessness
Yes.
that comes with that.
And you can sometimes as a woman uh turn to another man, not because you really want to be with him, but as a protective device, or turn to alcohol and drugs because you're so frantic. And that's the danger too that's out there. So with someone like you helping them and having an actual plan, that would relieve. so much of the stress that that could prevent those side things that we tend to do that. A lot of women do. And I don't
It,
blame them. I did it, you know. But so let's go back to this. So when gathering evidence for the custody battle, they make mistakes. There's number one. There's a number one mistake they make. What is that?
no, it's not documenting enough. And it's a
Mm.
shame too, because the thing about documentation, about getting evidence, is that there's like this trend on the internet saying, you don't have to get everything. You don't have to get everything. And we're finding more clients coming to us who have followed that advice, followed that trend. And
Mm.
then they're saying, hey, I'm being accused of X, Y, and Z. And we'll be all kind of like, well, all you have to do is produce evidence against it, show your recording of the exchange to show that, that never happened. And by the way, when it comes to recording, children should never be aware that you are. But, and they'll say, well, I don't have a bunch of stuff because it was getting exhausting. And I was kind of told you only use a small percentage anyway. It's kind of like, yes, but you use a small percentage of the total amount of what you've gotten. So it's, it's the number one thing we come across is that people don't have evidence of something. And we live now, it's like, especially the last few years, you would think it would be longer, but time is in a little bit of a warp for people when they realize how easy it is to record. It hasn't actually been that long
Yeah.
since it's been easy to record. It's been about 3 years or so.
Yeah. I
But
didn't
over
have
that,
those tools, unfortunately. I wish I did. Instead
okay,
of a gun, I would have. I should have bought some mace. That's what I should have done. I think back and I think, every time I saw him, if I hit him with some mace, maybe he would have left me alone.
maybe.
Yeah, but back then, even the mindset of a woman back then was totally different than in this decade. Totally different. I was the exception to the rule. I did not think that the woman had to be lesser than the man. I didn't believe that. I always wanted to go to college. I always wanted to be a teacher. And my parents and husbands, they stood in the way. But at 27 years old, I put myself through college. Never too
Mhm.
late. That was something I wanted, so I did it. you know. And at that age, I did not pursue being an educational high school English teacher, which was my original dream. But I did become a teacher because I taught handicapped people how to live alone in their own house or apartment where they were in nursing homes put there by their families.
Yeah.
And I taught them the skills. I taught quadriplegics
Mm.
and got them out of not nursing homes. And the families hated me. They hated me. Why? Because they were afraid. They were afraid. And I would show them the equipment that I got, how they could do things just by touching something with their forehead. I had it all mapped out. So the plan for me wasn't the plan that I made, but guess what? I was a teacher, right? I wasn't teaching English, but I was teaching something more important, actually, I think. So once these women, I just want them to hear this, once you get through all of this chaos, and go through your stress levels and get yourself to a point where you can love yourself again. There is a path and you can get on it no matter how old you are. Doesn't matter, you know, life's not over. But you see them when they're really beaten up emotionally.
Yeah. And I think what you're talking about really is like that next chapter,
Yes.
right?
So there is
Um,
another chapter, maybe two.
yes, yes. But no, when we're working with them, they are still in the thick of it.
Yeah.
And I would have to say, the second biggest mistake that we see with documentation, which I was hinting at, is the idea that because you've gathered all this documentation, that you should be using all of this documentation, when really the reason you're gathering that volume is because you're looking for the few pieces of gold in there that you can
Yeah.
then use. Yeah.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, if you can help the parents stay grounded when they feel everything stacked against them, how do you do that? How do you get them to feel like it's going to be okay?
I think that as they begin to see their case being built in a way that can actually work, it can really help to calm down the nervous system and see things more clearly. Um, we've talked about the fact that we're using a methodology, we're using a set of tools and templates called the custody blueprint. But what we're doing with that is there are the pieces everyone should be using. So we have everyone go through those. And then we have a full body of templates that are very specific to the custody blueprint.
Hmm.
We then will find certain pieces that belong with certain people for their cases. So really what's happening is that these moms are able to say, okay, now I'm beginning to understand what I've got. Now I'm beginning to also understand what out of my story, out of what the reality is of me and my children's lives, the court actually cares about. And while the rest of it is valid, those are the things that we need to let go of in order to focus on what will make a difference in court, because the rest becomes noise. It muddies the waters so that what is useful isn't as well paid attention to, because there's too much and there's irrelevant stuff.
Yeah.
Very relevant to these children, very relevant to these women,
Yeah.
very relevant in the world of abuse, but
Yeah.
not to court. And so we're looking at the abuse that will matter in court. We're looking at the control, at the actions, at the documentation that will work in court. And then we're going beyond that,
Yeah.
right? So what I'm looking at is the advantage of me having an actual real strategy background is that
Mhm.
I'm able to take everything that I know and my way of doing things and look at it and say, okay, now that we've put together your case in a way that we know will make sense to the court, how can we push the envelope? How can we possibly help the court to see the abuse, even though we can't call it abuse, even though we can't, push it too far?
Mhm.
What is it that we can put in there that will make it so that they cannot look away, they cannot stop hearing the story, but truly understand it, and this can make a difference?
Yeah.
And so what our work is transforming their cases. So if we have someone who came in and you're describing someone who's very powerful, very well connected, small town,
Mhm.
when we get cases that are like that, whether they have all of those elements or some of those elements, it's still an uphill battle and it's still a losing case. So we're looking
Mhm.
at, this person was a primary caregiver. How can we keep her the primary caregiver? And if it looks like what they want to do because of the connections is take the children away completely, then we have to decide, is our strategy to show she's the primary caregiver, or is our strategy to simply allow these children to still be with her? And we're able to look at it through a lens and decide what we want to do. My first choice is always going to be that the primary caregiver stays a primary caregiver, and that's the
Yeah.
number one thing I'm
Yeah.
fighting.
So
It's very hard for me to give up and step back and say we need to change our strategy to at
right.
least hold on to strategy. But if
Yeah.
that's what we need to do, of course,
Yeah.
that's what we're going to do. I
Well,
can't be a
you're
dog
the
with the bone.
expert. That's why they went to you. So why don't you just clarify it a little bit more? Let's go through the core pillars of the blueprint.
Sure.
Walk us through that.
So there are three pillars to the custody blueprint. One of them is strategy, and then there's evidence and mindset. We've talked
Mhm.
a little bit about mindset, which, as we're working with people, we talk about their core persona, but also under the umbrella of mindset is, how is this parent presenting her parenting? Because there are places where women can get trapped into talking about their own parenting in a bad way, even though there's nothing bad about it. There are also look, it used to be that people would say, well, there's no manual to being a parent. There are all kinds of manuals to being a parent. There are entire sections in bookstores
Yeah.
to be a parent, right? And so sometimes people might be raising two or three kids and one of them is having problems. So sometimes we might take a look at saying, talk about what you're doing with each of these kids, talk about what's working, what's not, so that we can
Mhm.
focus on making the court understand that you're a good parent, this didn't work, but it's not because you're a bad parent, right? So
Right.
we're sort of looking at both of those things, and people get very surprised by the way we talk about it, right? But we're looking at that, and all of it has to be 100% truth. Anybody who's coming in to the court saying something that isn't accurate, that isn't completely true, they're going to get caught one way or another, and then they lose credibility entirely if they're female, right?
Yeah.
The other two pillars then are going to be strategy and evidence. We've talked a little bit about evidence in a larger way,
Yeah.
but we're really drilling down, when we're doing a deep dive into everyone's evidence, we're really looking for the top two or three categories that they can go in with. And then we're finding a way to make those things so robust,
Mm.
so convincing, right?
Mm.
And we're doing this in a way that helps their lawyer. The work we're doing does not take the place of a lawyer. Rather,
Yeah.
it actually really helps the lawyer.
Absolutely.
When people hire a lawyer, I think too many protective moms think of the lawyer as their savior. They're going to come in and they're going to win my case. But that's, if you ask me, if we take aside the literalness of it, it's not
Mm.
actually really completely a lawyer's job. The lawyer's job is to be your voice in court.
Yeah.
So if people step back and say, well, of course, my lawyer's job is to win. Okay, yes, I will agree with that statement in and of itself. But I'm working behind the scenes. I'm trying to fill the gap to breach the huge gaping chasm between my lawyer is my savior and yet why am I not winning? Well, the
Exactly.
reason why they're slowly but surely death by a thousand paper cuts for many protective moms, losing more and more time with their children, more and more protection of their children, is because they're leaving the case in the hands of their
Yes.
lawyer,
Yes.
right? And
Absolutely.
so the first thing they need to do is understand that they are the ones driving this. They
Yeah.
are the ones preparing their case. They really are. And the second thing they need to do is to do that in exactly the right way. Right.
And I have a funny thing to say. With the the father of my children, his lawyer. I am now married to his lawyer's brother.
My God, that is hysterical.
So ironic, right? And I actually sat across from him when he was defending my ex, and it was years later. And I had been in a relationship, and every time I tried to be in a relationship, if it didn't work out, the ex would find out, he'd call me immediately, like he couldn't let go of me. Like it could have been 3 years, 4 years. And oh, you're single again. Like he wants to worm his way back. So when I got with my husband, God, it had been, I want to say 14 years since I was divorced from the tormentor. And he called. And my husband, who I'm with 40 years now, okay, he's sitting next to me. And the ex started, oh, I heard you're single. I said, no, not only am I in a relationship, but it's with your lawyer's brother. I enjoyed saying that so much.
Yes, I bet you did. That is
So
hysterical.
anyway, it's sort of an ironic twist at the end, you know. But yeah, it wasn't me. We're together 40 years. So I guess it wasn't me that was the bad person, you know.
Yeah.
And my kids loved love my husband. They call him Poppy, and he's been in their life since they're teenagers, you know. So he walked them down the aisle. He's
Oh,
there. He's the one they think of. And our grandchildren, um, they adore him. They adore him. So I looked up. I made it. I survived.
yes, you did.
There is a way.
Thrive and thrive.
Yes, that's the thing, is survive and thrive. So tell me one of your success stories, that a parent whose case was in the garbage, it wasn't going anywhere, and they came to you and you kind of transformed it with your program.
Sure.
I'm sure there's many, but
There are, but I'm
let's
trying
pick
to think.
one.
I will admit the one that's popping into my head right now is the one we work all throughout Canada, United States, and a few other countries as
Yeah.
well. And she was over in the Midwest, and her case was a tough one because her ex was really taking the children. They had three girls, and basically disparaging the mom and alienating. Um,
The children.
Trying to alienate. The problem is that he was problematic himself, but you have to understand, and well, I'm sure you know well enough that the way they show up in court is like sincere, wonderful father, and then the minute they step out of the courtroom, it's there's a lot of cruelty, and he was particularly overt. They're either overt or covert. It's either behind closed doors or anytime, just not in front of the right people, right? Um, And he was particularly problematic, to the point where one of the children didn't really want to have much to do with him anyway. But he decided that he wanted to go for 50-50, even though these children were practically in their teens. They, had mom as the primary caregiver.
Yeah.
But he was also trying to, and every time, this is very common, very common. He also is constantly taking her to child support court to try to keep getting the child support lower, lower, lower,
Lower,
lower,
lower.
lower, finding reasons to not pay it at
Yeah.
all. So
Yeah.
the 50-50 idea was, it's often, and sometimes when there are studies where there are surveys where they will actually admit that it's kind of like, look, the number one reason I need to do this because I don't want to be paying. I don't want to be paying, right? And if they get 50-50, then their chances of having to pay diminish significantly. And if they do have to pay, it's much less. And that's what this guy was really going for.
Yeah.
They ended up getting a custody evaluator. And this woman turned out to singularly be very, very good. Now, the other thing that made this difficult was the children were being kind of caught. Like one of the girls was especially not sure, like where she wanted to live and what she wanted. She was ready to testify on behalf of her father, which is just child abuse, right?
Mhm.
Um, but also, this particular client didn't present well. Not because there was anything wrong with her, but because it was all so upsetting for her that she would cry at the drop of a hat, which we, find obviously the trauma, the idea of these children being subjected to their abuser more was particularly upsetting for her. Because he was refusing to pay for this, that, and the other thing, money was tight. So the evaluations, which are expensive, very expensive, they'll be in the thousands, felt even more high stakes than it already was. And so a lot of what we did was we were working on getting her body of evidence ready, right? So
Mhm.
she ended up having an immense amount of evidence. His messages to her were, it's almost as if he forgot that things in writing
Ah,
are forever.
ah,
Um,
yes.
we put these
Mhm.
things together. But here's what's really interesting about this was that she felt she had some evidence that she showed me. And I could tell, which I often can, that there was probably more. So I asked her to go looking for some doctors, clinical notes. I asked her to look for teachers' emails. And I also asked her to dig a little bit deeper in her own messages and emails. And she ended up giving me a huge amount of evidence that she employed us to look through. And it was unbelievable what we found. It really was. And this is where it gets really interesting, and it happens all the time, Mimi. I can't tell you all the time. It turns out that her children were recording their phone calls with their father. And she had me listen to a couple of these calls to see what we should do to them. And it was horrifying the way he talked to these children. He mocked them, he bribed them, he called them names, he disparaged the mother. He
Oh,
there was manipulation the whole way through, coercive control the
yeah,
whole way through.
yeah,
And so I ended up telling her, look, it's so fascinating that these children came to you and said, Mom, use this. And it's heartbreaking that they did that.
yeah,
You know,
it
we
is.
can't really use it, but what you can know is that your children are going to be interviewed as well. And it sounds like they're going to have a lot to say.
Yeah.
Oh, by the time the children were interviewed by the evaluator, and by the time the mom was done with all of her evaluations,
Hmm.
the evaluation report came out almost entirely in my client's favor. I say almost because if you have an eval report that is 100% in someone's favor, it's probably going to get thrown out. So, I don't know that every evaluator works this way. I certainly cannot speak for every evaluators, but there is some recognition that it can look biased because perhaps it is biased if it's exactly completely in
Hmm.
someone's favor. But the
Yeah.
reality is when you have someone who is abusive and manipulative, it's very hard to throw them a bone. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's very hard
And
to give them anything.
getting back to the children, I know from my own experience, it's like all the stuff that went on in those days and everything. They still love their father. I mean, they
Yeah.
still loved their father,
Yeah.
and there's no way. And this internal paternal love. Um, of course, they weren't subject to everything. They didn't know everything, nor do I want them to know everything. Um, but it all over, finally, like I said, I married his lawyer's brother, but he's still supposed to pay child support. And he didn't. And after a while, it built up and I had him arrested, because it was against the law not to pay child support. And
Mhm.
he went to jail. And the first thing he told his kids when he got out was, "Your mother sent me to jail." You
Yeah,
know.
that's
So
common. Yeah,
that happened twice that he went to jail.
yeah.
And that was the only money, only child support I ever got from him. But again, it's still their father. I never bring it up. I don't talk about it, even though it's years, of course. And they're like 50 years old. I have full-grown adult children. But their father, their biological father, had heart problems. And my youngest daughter, he came to her after not being around, not seeing his grandchildren, not calling, but because he was in trouble and had nowhere to live. And she had a basement apartment and she let him move in there. And my granddaughter was like horrified and she told me about it. But my granddaughter's also, I won't say, well, I'll say it, she's a shit stirrer. You know what I'm talking about. And we're sitting on the patio with my daughter and my granddaughter. That's it. And Vanessa, my granddaughter, says, "Oh, Nana, do you know that they call him Big Daddy because he's so big?
Mhm.
Do you know Big Daddy's going to come live with us?" Because she didn't realize how I would react. And I turned to her and I said, "I think that's wonderful that your mother is doing that. What a wonderful thing to do. Tracy, I applaud you for doing that, for helping him out."
Hmm.
And my granddaughter was like her mouth just dropped open because she had heard some of the stories. And I thought, look how strong that bond can be. Now the other daughter wants nothing to do with him. So
Yeah.
again, they talk about daddy's girl or mommy's girl or whatever, but parental linkage is very hard to break, no matter how abusive the parent is. Does that make sense to you?
It does, and it is true. It gets easier to I'm not going to say let go, actually. It gets easier for someone to have a firmer boundary,
Yeah,
mm, in some cases. And if it is about what you served, which is at having at least one healthy parent who has an awareness,
hmm,
really handles this right, can
yeah,
help mitigate the ACEs that the children are
yeah,
suffering through, that they're experiencing.
yeah,
So I think where it really comes out more so honestly is, somewhere in the 25th year, the prefrontal cortex of the brain is fully formed. Now the brain is fully formed, the sense of security, the sense of self. And it's about the therapies. It's about the
yeah,
recovery from having a childhood with an abuser person. I mean, there's a billion jokes out there about going to therapy because of your parents, but when one of them
yeah,
was abusive, then we really are talking a particular kinds of therapies, particular kinds of work in
yes,
order to overcome the messaging that the child was received and adopted, because that's how children operate.
yes.
Right?
And
But yeah.
luckily, I have done therapy. I still do therapy. My daughter is a therapist. She is a psychologist with her own business, and she's done therapy. And my granddaughter has done some therapy. She resists sometimes, but she's bipolar and she needs to do it. And thank God we have that, like, because my parents, if I said, "Oh, I need to go to therapy, I want to talk to a counselor." What? What are you talking about? We're decades apart here, Renee. My experience are as much as I can give my advice and my take on what I went through with this situation. It's vastly different than what happens today. There are more resources, and there are more ways to collect information, to document, you know.
I think the one thing that still has a long way to go is
But it's more than 1972 or three. You're really we're gonna run out of time, so I have to ask you a couple important things. So what do you want every protective parent listening to know? The most important thing. I think I know the answer, but give it.
they need to take ownership of their case.
Yes. And the documentation of everything really is key.
That's the part
Yes.
of it. Yep.
So what's next for the custody blueprint program? What's your long-term vision for how this work is going to help change the custody landscape?
Yeah, so we have been developing over the past year or so some some apps, some programs. It took us a long time to come to the app area because everybody's got an app type of thing, but we were like, we need something that's actually going to work.
Yeah.
So we're creating something that can make it easier for a
Uh-huh.
client to be able to handle the sheer volume of documentation and understanding. We're trying to get sort of my strategy brain into something. We'd like to make that more available to people so that
Mhm.
people we can only take so many clients at a time. Many times we have a waiting list. And so we wanted to create something that could go out to the masses so that more people could have access to something, even if it is on a scale that isn't as large as working side by side with us, something that could still make a huge difference in their cases.
Oh, it would. Absolutely. Well, Renee, thank you. Thank you for your courage, your clarity, your commitment. Uh, And for people that feel unheard and unseen in the system, you are very well needed. And to everyone listening, if you're in the middle of a custody battle or you know someone who is, remember this, you're not crazy. You know, you're not crazy. You're not overreacting and you're not alone. Okay. Because I know that feeling. There is a blueprint, there is a strategy, and there's a way forward. And thank you, Renee, for showing that to us.
Thank you, Mimi, for allowing me to be here and talk to your audience.
It was wonderful. We could talk more. We will talk more another time. All right, everyone, be your own warrior, but you need help and you need documentation. Okay, have a great day.